Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Best8a Podcast. In today's episode, we're joined by Matthew Schoonover, managing member of the law firm Schoonover and Moriarty, which counsels clients through SBA's various socioeconomic program regulations, including the 8A program regulations and how to maintain compliance with them. Many thanks to Matthew for joining us to discuss the implications of the injunction issued by the Federal District Court of Tennessee over the rebuttable presumption of social disadvantage in place under the 8A Business Development Program. With Ezekiel Russell, founder of the Best8a Podcast.
You know what I'm going to ask you about the whole 8A Tennessee situation. I suspect it's not a big deal, but everybody says that it is a big deal. What do you think? It is a big deal or no?
I think it's a huge deal. And so by way of background, the 8A program is a program that SBA administers that is designed to help individuals who have suffered through social and economic disadvantage in their participation essentially in the American economy through their access to employment, education, and economic opportunities. And there were two main components to 8A socioeconomic program eligibility. And the first was that your company had to, or that you had to, be the victim of social disadvantage because of some characteristic or trait that you have. And the regulations presumed that members of certain racial and ethnic groups have suffered disadvantage just based on our country's own sad and tragic history of discrimination. And so SBA's regulations said that, okay, for certain individuals that belong to these groups, we are going to presume that they have suffered from social disadvantage. And recently, on, I believe it was July 19th, a federal court out of the Eastern District of Tennessee enjoined or essentially stopped the SBA from relying on that presumption of social disadvantage in granting 8A eligibility. Essentially, the court had decided that doing so is a racial preference in violation of the Constitution, that the government did not adequately explain the rationale for giving this preference, and so the use of the presumption. So for certain individuals, as part of that application process, what would happen is usually if you were not a member of a presumed group, you would have to tell the SBA, here's what my characteristics are and here's how they've led to social and economic disadvantage. If you were a member of a presumed group, say you're a Black American or Hispanic American, among others, that SBA would presume that based on your belonging to that group that you had suffered the requisite social disadvantage. Now, you would still have to establish economic disadvantage and other things, but SBA would presume that you had suffered social disadvantage under those regulations. And so now what the Eastern District in Tennessee has done is said, no, SBA, it is not fair for you to presume that some folks are socially disadvantaged and not others, when the result of that presumption means that some folks may have better access or greater access to 8A contracts.
So you were talking about two variables or two things, and this is the first one?
That's right. The second variable to get into the 8A program is economic disadvantage, that you have to show that as a result of your social disadvantage or the characteristic claim for your social disadvantage, that you had suffered some lasting or measurable impact on your ability to advance in the American economy. Say that your educational opportunities have been diminished, your employment opportunities have been diminished, or your economic opportunities, like your access to capital or funding, have been adversely affected by or as a result of your social disadvantage. Importantly, I will say that the court's ruling out of Tennessee does not impact or address the economic disadvantage element to an 8A application. It really only applies to the presumption of social disadvantage as part of the application for 8A admission.
Okay, and what's the difference between social and economic?
Yeah, so social discrimination, it's a great question. Social discrimination under SBA's regulations, well, at least before this court decision, SBA might presume that you were socially discriminated against or disadvantaged because, say, you're a black man, and of course there is a history of racial animus in our country, and oftentimes that history of racial animus has led to decreased opportunities for those individuals. So you would have the social disadvantage piece, the, hey, I am a black American, or I'm a member of this group, or I have this characteristic. And then you have the economic disadvantage piece, which says, because I have this characteristic, here's how I've been adversely impacted.
How are people reacting? What's going on right now with this meeting that SBA is having with all 8As? What is it they're requiring to them, and what is your advice to them? What are the next steps?
Yeah, so as a result of this court ruling, essentially what SBA is doing is they are making those companies who have 8A eligibility as a result of the presumption of social disadvantage to complete a narrative that details, 3 to 5 instances, I would say, but details instances where their characteristic, their trait, has led them to be discriminated against in their economic and educational employment opportunities. So, say for example, we have an individual who, maybe has Native American heritage, and was previously admitted into the 8A program as a result of that heritage. There was the presumption of disadvantage. Now what they may need to do, or what they need to do under SBA's guidance, is to actually fill out or complete a narrative that says, hey, because I am a Native American, I was passed up for these job opportunities. I was denied these promotions. I was denied these economic benefits. Maybe I was denied a loan or access to capital. I was denied educational opportunities that my peers who don't share this characteristic were granted. And SBA is looking for detail. They're looking to know the who, what, when, where, why, and how.
That is hard to write. I mean, in my view, it's hard to even articulate.
It is. It's a very difficult thing, and it's a weird thing because oftentimes when we talk about discrimination or disadvantage that people have faced, this is a very painful thing for them to recall, for them to have gone through, and so to go back and ask for a narrative that details these instances. And tries to explain. I mean, it can be embarrassing, it can be hurtful, it can be problematic.
I was just thinking that it was a little bit difficult. Sometimes it's not something that you can actually measure or be too specific about. Isn't that true that if somebody suffers discrimination, in a way, it's not what happens to you, it's also what does not happen to you. Let's say that you are not promoted in a company. I mean, what are you going to do? You cannot really prove it.
And that's a very good point. And SBA's regulations don't require you to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. It is, you need to create a rebuttable presumption that this discrimination led to disadvantage. And you do so by providing details about those incidents. And importantly, one of the things that SBA is going to look for is there an alternative explanation? What they're going to do is they're going to take a look at the information that you provide. It's not like they're going to conduct an independent investigation and go out and cross-examine all these witnesses and ask for a bunch of documents. They're not going to do that. They're going to read the information that you've provided and say, well, wait a second. Based on what you've told us, do we think that it's maybe something else that has led to this? And if so, they're going to ask you about that. So let's take, for example, we have an instance where maybe we have somebody who has suffered some type of physical disability that has led them to be alienated from American society, and they're saying, hey, I was denied a job opportunity because I have this disability. SBA is going to look at that and say, okay, were you denied the opportunity because of the disability? Or did the disability mean that you couldn't fulfill the job requirements for that position?
Right.
And that is the reason why you were denied. So when you were providing this narrative or this explanation to SBA, you need to give information is sufficient to kind of remove those doubts, to say it is because of this that I was denied this opportunity. It is because of my heritage that I was denied this opportunity, not because of this other reason, because I disproved that other reason to the bank when they denied my loan.
I say it's very difficult because let's say you go to a bank, your paperwork is fine.
Yep.
And they don't give you the loan because they did, in fact, discriminate. But I think it's very difficult to prove. I mean, I would say that the whole job of the guy who is discriminating or the organization who is discriminating is to prove that they don't discriminate. And they have other reasons, you know what I mean? So
You're exactly right. And that can be the hard part about this. Very rarely is there direct evidence of discrimination leading to economic disadvantage. That is, it's very rare that you have a letter from a bank that says, we denied you for this loan because you are black.
Of course.
Or because you are a member of this group. That is very, very rare that would happen. Now, so what the job of the applicant to do, or the 8A applicant to do, is to essentially, as I mentioned, to kind of remove all doubt. That really, that's the only plausible explanation. I have great credit. I've never missed a payment on my loans before. I had significant financial backing that I put up as collateral for this loan. And maybe I was given an interest rate that was significantly higher than a white colleague who had whose credit wasn't as good, or who didn't have as much collateral, or maybe I was denied and they weren't. So it's about presenting, here's why I think this was discriminatory. Now, to my point a moment ago, you're very rarely going to have direct evidence of that. And SBA doesn't require you to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. This is why you were, denied these economic opportunities.
So, Matthew, in a way, then, I think 8A companies are going to be able to write specific experience. I know it's difficult to come up with specific experience. What do you think? Because I already talked with some guys and they say, hey, it's hard for me to describe this.
Here's the thing that I think I'm noticing in my discussions with clients who are now going through the process and having to write their 8A narratives, their social disadvantage narratives in response to this court ruling. I think, and this is a very unfortunate and tragic thing to say, but I think a lot of the individuals who were admitted to the 8A program because of the presumption of social disadvantage likely have suffered enough disadvantage in their lifetime to meet the requirements of the social narrative. Again, to provide 3 to 5 instances of times where their characteristic or their trait has led to them being denied some type of opportunity. And it's very tragic to say that.
But look, I'm a positive guy, so what you're seeing as a bad thing in the context of let's communicate these things to the SBA, there will be no problem. That's what you're saying.
Right. What I'm saying is hopefully those folks that have been in the program because of the presumption of the disadvantage are able to articulate actual instances of disadvantage where they stay in the program, where they're able to stay in the program.
A quick question. What are the impact for people receiving a sole source right now? Do you think sole sources or 8A companies will have an impact right now? I'm not seeing it. I see some little issues, but I don't think it's happening. No, except USDA, I believe that there's no stop. Would you agree, or what do you know about it?
Well, no. So there is, SBA is requiring those companies that are about to be awarded a sole source contract or that have a competitive 8A application that are out there. They want those companies to get their narrative in as soon as they can. For a new sole source contract, SBA is going to have to make sure that the company is an actual 8A participant. As a result of this ruling, that means that they have to be eligible for it with their own narrative. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you're an 8A company and you have not yet received guidance from the SBA, you need to reach out to your 8A business opportunity specialist and get that guidance, because you need to start working on this narrative now and get it submitted as soon as you can, because that is something that may impact your award. I know SBA is prioritizing the applications or the narratives for those companies, and they're trying to review them as fast as they can. But as you might understand, there's a lot of companies that are affected by this. And so certainly do not delay. Make sure that you're getting this in as soon as you can.
And you know what would be bad? Somebody gets delayed on this thing, and then they're about to receive an award, and then the issue comes up to the surface, and they need to fix the problem. So in other words, fix it now before you're about to receive an award and you're in trouble. Do you think that scenario is possible? Do you get it?
Yes. Yeah. Put the narrative in as soon as you can, because that's going to help avoid issues going forward.
Got you. Hey, Matthew, I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you today. And obviously, I would encourage your listeners to check out govconbrief.com, because we've been updating about the Ultima decision and its impact on 8A companies. And so we're certainly going to continue to do that as well.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Best8a Podcast.